The sweetness of God. This is the second in the Devo series, and this one is called Manna. Anyone? In Exodus 16 is a familiar story about the manna that came down from heaven for the hungry wanderers in the desert. They were hungry and began to grumble against their leader, wishing they were back in slavery where at least they had pots of meat, the savory. They accused their leaders of bringing them out to the desert to die of starvation, and then God answers with this: I will rain down bread from heaven for you. And then he gives specific instructions for gathering the bread, just enough for each day, no hoarding, no storing. Moses tells the people, and in the evening, you know it was the Lord that brought you out of slavery, and in the morning you will see his glory. Why would that be? In the evening, they would have eaten all the manna and felt satisfied, and in the morning, the manna would be present again for that day in all its glory and all its sweetness. Later, this chapter describes the manna, and guess what? It was sweet. It says in the morning, when the dew fell on the ground, it then dried into flakes like frost, and the people were told to gather what they needed and not keep any for the next day, because God promised that it would fall daily. Many people disobeyed and kept some, and guess what? The bread had maggots on it, or the manna. It was unfit to eat, and it smelled horrid. In verse 31, the manna is described as being white and that it tasted like wafers made with honey. And God told Moses to keep some for generations to come so that they could see the bread given to the ancestors in the wilderness. Interesting, he told Moses to keep some, but the people were to daily gather just what they needed. Let's stop here a second. I always thought when I was little that manna was just like bland bread or like a dry piece of toast, but it was anything but. It was a daily treat from God's hand after a long day's hard work and journey in the wilderness. But the people thought that God might not continue his faithfulness, so they wanted to store up the sweetness. Only that sweetness, which was meant to be a daily blessing like morning dew, when stored in disobedience, turned into something unfit to eat. The Israelites then ate the manna the entire time they were in the wilderness. I find it interesting that we spend most of our days trying to store up the goodness of life as a preservative against bad times. Saving is important, but saving out of fear is not. Fear drove these people to disobey God's directive to trust him, and their own desire for self-preservation kicked in and caused them to disobey. That which was meant to be tasted and enjoyed daily, sweet like honey, was to be noted as coming from his hand to satisfy their hunger in the middle of the desert, and they were to lie down at night without worry about the next day's provision, because manna would be there every single morning after darkness gave way to the light. God didn't transform the wilderness into a Garden of Eden, but rather he provided sweetness in the heat of the struggle, and a sweetness that sustained all those who obeyed. A single mom friend of mine recently wrote an article about her daughter growing up and how she, the mom, ruined all of the special moments with her daughter for fear of when the daughter was going to leave. She realized how many moments of sweetness were lost in the fear of the future, and I could totally relate to what she wrote. I think it's hard for most of us to look to God's daily provision instead of demanding that he show up with a safety deposit box and give us the key for withdrawal whenever we want. He set up the process of looking back over the day as night draws near and realizing that what we had eaten was from his hand, that he provided, that it was good, and that we were to lie down at night and rest and sleep, knowing that his provision would be there like the morning dew when we wake up. That's called peace, and it tastes like honey on a wafer of sweet bread. And it's good from the Father in daily doses, daily bread. Consider the manna you ate today and look for it tomorrow while you struggle through today. And allow the taste of that sweetness to sustain you and be something you can tell to generations after you of the sweetness of God in the wilderness called life.